Welcome to the Fractured Families podcast. I'm Charity, your dedicated parental alienation coach, here to guide and support families as they navigate the challenges of high conflict divorces and custody battles. On this podcast, we'll share insights, practical strategies, and hope for those on the journey toward healing and justice. Whether you're personally experiencing these challenges or just want to learn more about the complexities of parental alienation and custody disputes, you're in the right place. You are not alone. This is the Fractured Families podcast, where every voice matters and every story is heard. And if you find my conversation helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us reach more families who need it. Hi, thanks for joining the Fractured Families podcast. This is Charity. I'm your host. I have with me today Dana Luther. She's going to talk to us about her 10-year battle with parental alienation from her ex-husband, who her son is now alienated, and her daughter at the age of 11 is in the stages of being alienated. So Dana, thanks for joining. Why don't you get us started? Tell us a little bit about how this is happening and how you recognize parental alienation.
Well, to caveat, I filed for divorce almost 10 years ago. It was kind of your classic battle from go, with every tactic used, kind of under the sun, to, make it last longer. It took almost 2 years. I will say I didn't recognize, I guess, the alienating behaviors. I think my son was about nine or 10 when it finalized. And slowly I saw changes in him through the middle school years, and particularly when COVID hit. He was a freshman, and that seemed to impact him a lot. But I just noticed like a lot of the disrespectful behaviors being, pretty horrible to myself, and really bullying his little sister, who was quite a bit younger than her. And, and talking to other people who've had teens, are like, oh, that's normal teen behavior. But he seemed to have a pretty good understanding, because he had witnessed so much of what had gone on with the smear campaign and being harassed and bullied by people in the small town that we were in, because my ex coached football and wrestling and baseball. And so he had this plethora of women. It was mostly the women, the moms, that had been my friends. I had even taken girls' trips with them, that absolutely turned on me. And I couldn't go anywhere without, being videotaped or snarled at or harassed in some way. But I kept, I always showed up. And my son, at one point, he started crying. He said, "Mom, why don't you stand up for yourself?" And I said, "Because I can't. That's what they want me to do. Because you got somebody poking and someone videoing, hoping that I will have a reaction." And I said that there will come a time when I can address these people and their behaviors, but now is not the time. And so I had finished a remodel on our farm. We'd been there about 12 years. And I thought, you know what, it's time for me to start over somewhere. And we were down to just one horse. So it was easier to board it and kind of have a life outside of just taking care of that place. And so we moved about 20 minutes north. And I had done well financially on the farm, because I'd put a lot of work into, finishing everything. And that, from what I understand, really angered him. So I was able to, buy my new place, and I was able to come out of it. He didn't financially cripple me. My career started up again. We were in a brand new place that he couldn't come around here at the farm. He knew when we were going out of town, because my son would tell him. And so, the longer we were here, the more the behaviors worsened, I guess. And he wouldn't even come downstairs in a good mood. He would just come downstairs complaining. And if we were doing something and we were enjoying ourselves, he would have to try and wreck it. And so there was a lot of conflict. And I will say, him kind of getting on board playing that Fortnite game through, that was something I was completely unaware of, but it just really brings out a lot of anger. But the one thing I didn't understand is that he really had his father and the stepmother, who he married pretty quickly after the divorce, who was formerly the mistress, the work mistress. And they were both fired during the divorce. I didn't know any of this until about a year into it, that when the puzzle pieces started coming together. And then I also have an older sister who, our family, we won't have any contact with her. She's just done so many things over the years that to my mom, my dad, my other sister. And so that's kind of her way of, well, if you don't get to ignore me, I'm going to go after your kids. And I'm going to pretend to be, I'm just the aunt that wants a relationship. So I have to use your ex-husband to do that. And my ex-husband never liked her, but he used her,
Right.
to try and advocate for him. But essentially, my son got through freshman year, sophomore year. Things were up and down. He had kind of started dating a girl kind of seriously, and she had some real red flags to her and had a history to her. And she was seeing him and then cheated on him, and I stayed out of it. I said, son, I'm only going to tell you two things. I said, she's shown you who she is, believe it. I said, never give somebody a second chance to hurt you twice. And at that time, he was saying things like, I don't want to effing hear it, mom. And at the minute the driver's license and the girlfriend came in, it really went downhill from there. It empowered him more so. And we had taken a camping trip for his 17th birthday, and she had come and some other friends had come, and we had a great time. And then he went back to his dad's for that week. And he had never taken him on a trip ever. So that was kind of took him on a trip, and then he came back, and then he was constantly being caught lying. I'm one of those moms that's like, well, wait a minute. And so I just said, we're going to have to talk about this when you get home. And when I picked him up, he hugged me. He didn't bring any of his fishing gear. And that was another red flag. I'm like, where's your fishing stuff? He's like, oh, I forgot it. And he was really just kind of icky on the way home. And then we got home 5 minutes, and it was the day before school started. And I said, you guys, we got to sit down because, these kids, they'd come here, they would wreck the house the week that they were here and leave. And I'd spend the whole next week while they're at their dad's cleaning. I'm like, that's not fair. I shouldn't have to do that and rewash laundry because you just throw it on the floor. And he just blew up. He said, I'm out of here and I'm standing up to you and take me to court and I can decide. And then the accusations came out, and I did record him because I'm like, I'm tired of being accused of things. But, prior to that, I'd found out he was having all these secret communications with my sister.
The parenting time arrangement, what was that like? So how much time did he spend with his father?
It was 5225 to begin with. And then, there's been a lot of neglect on the side with respect to my daughter. And we had gone through a evaluation to try and get her to go to school up here. The schools up here are much better. And he switched it to week on, week off, which the kids actually didn't like. And they still don't. Well, my daughter doesn't. So, but essentially that's the end of it. I mean, he pretty much walked out of here. I have not heard one word from him since. I've, texted him occasionally. I've always remembered the birthdays and the Christmas and this and that. And it's been over 2.5 years now. I've always gone and kept watching his baseball and activities. And it was really hurtful on the senior nights. I didn't go. I was not notified of them. And the stepmother is standing there in the picture as if she is mom. And apparently he calls me Dana now. He doesn't call me mom anymore. And people that have known me for years, they've tried to talk to him because they actually have, one of them in particular has a sister that's going through the same thing. And he said, Dana, he just shuts down. He just said, Dana and I don't talk anymore. But the last communication that I sent to him was when he had gone to college. He had an offer to play baseball for a small junior college and just said that, hey, we'd like to send you a care package if you can give me your address. And we were at a state 4-H dog show for my daughter, and it's down near where he was going to college. And my daughter had told me that he, read that text to his dad and then said, but don't worry, I didn't respond to her.
Wow.
So that's kind of where we're at. And I didn't communicate at all with him. I just left him alone. This was in the fall, sent Christmas gifts. And then I sent him a few messages recently because we had to put his old cat down. Mm-hmm. And that was one of those where you feel like, oh my God, I have to give him all the details. So I'm not accused of somehow, she probably poisoned your cat, or I actually got accused of that. I made a chicken pot pie and sent it to him. And the stepmother threw it in the garbage and said, we better throw this away because she's probably poisoned.
Oh my gosh. And now how did you hear that?
My daughter.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so it sounds like a lot of, it's a bad combination between those two because she didn't have children. She was married for a long time, but apparently my ex was not the only one within the company that she was getting around with. And he likewise, I know people that know him have said he's a fantastic human, but she's taken to kind of the role of And I don't think she realizes it, where she's doing the dirty work. Well, your mom's lazy. Well, you know how your mom yells. Well, and all these things that aren't true. And they've just filled these kids' heads. Your mom's manipulative. Your mom's a liar. All of these things that actually they are. And,
Right.
just like anything, you can't fight it. They're going to believe what they want
Yeah.
to believe. But I'm at that point now of trying to kind of just let go. I mean, he's going to be 20. He did quit college. He came back. He's taken classes online, I guess, and working and making plans to move out. So I feel like that's a positive move in the right direction of kind of breaking that control factor there. But now, as my son is moving out of this dynamic, the doubling down on my daughter has started. And now I've had her in counseling with a great counselor, but they just discharged her to kind of let her get out on her own and apply. And her counselor's also moving, which kind of concerns me. But I'm seeing the same like disrespect. You don't matter. Your feelings don't matter. You're just here to do for me, and I want this. And it's a struggle because you kind of can't win. Even though on the other side, they don't have to buy her anything. They don't have to go out of their way to do anything for her. And so that's kind of that fear of history repeating itself. And it's caused so much damage in everybody. I mean, kind of that loss of relationship between siblings, because, my son's also been taught that his sister doesn't have value either, because she's a girl, that he'll be, nice occasionally when he wants something, or, his dad's put him up to it. We need you to, take your sister out for ice cream. Because we did do a CFI and it was all this, oh, it's so wonderful. He takes her for ice cream every Friday. Well, that lasted a couple weeks and then it's never happened again. So my son is very much entrenched in being a player in this whole thing, which I thought was odd though, because he did make the comment that he thinks it's important for Kylan to have a relationship with both of us. But then on the other hand, he said he wanted nothing to do with me.
So let's talk about your sister. How did she contribute to that? And what is that relationship like today?
She doesn't live in the state, but she's constantly just, trying to do the, oh, hey, Bubba, that kind of thing, like as if, they're her kids. And she's doing that, well, your mom, saying things like with sports, well, my dad was really hard on, our dad was really hard on your mom. That's why, she pushes this. And it's just all not true. I haven't spoken to the woman in over 10 years. And she has failed miserably as a mother herself, twice divorced, affairs with married men, no career. And she's the oldest, and she's always had a real distinct jealousy of my middle sister and I. So I think it makes her feel better to think that somehow we are failing and we're not. Like we're all gainfully employed and have homes and all the things that she does not. And accomplishments, she's never accomplished anything. But she is one that will always, even as we were kids, she was always going to cause a problem on a holiday, somebody's birthday, temper tantrums if she didn't get what she wanted, no respect for anybody's boundaries, home, anything. So she is very much a very toxic person for my kids to have any involvement with.
So when your daughter is at your home with you, does she communicate with your sister at all?
No.
Okay.
No, and I don't know what communications happened not on my time. When my son was younger, it was his dad paid for his phone and I paid for my daughter's.
Mm-hmm.
Then they got her a new phone and my phone's not allowed in their house and that phone's not allowed over here. So I have no idea who she communicates with, but I mean, they're definitely planting the seeds and doing all of that. And I think the one thing I can say is even talking to teachers, they've said, he's not the same anymore. He doesn't smile anymore. He doesn't goof around anymore. And had friends that, I run into and they're like, yeah, he's just ostracized or he's isolated himself. He won't have anything to do with any of us. So he pretty much had like picked the girl and the girl was like, you don't contact anybody. It's just you and I. And they dated for about a year and a half, but they've been broken up for, gosh, I want to say almost a little over a year. And it seems like he's reconnected with friends and is doing some things like that. But what I know in my heart is that until he doesn't need his father financially anymore, I will not hear from him.
It's been 2.5 years and you haven't spoken to him and you're starting to see those patterns in your daughter. What was the relationship with the children like during the marriage? And did you, in retrospect, do you think there was anything going on with the intact household?
I do now. I didn't then because he really wasn't involved. He really wasn't. It was one of those situations where I was a married single mom, housework, farm work, everything for the kids. The only thing that he did do was coach. And he was very, very obsessed with my son and his performance in all sports. And he played football, wrestled, and played baseball. Wrestling in particular, because he was a wrestler and he was absolutely obsessed with it. And my son quit football and wrestling in 6th grade. But the minute he was alienated, he was forced to go back to wrestling and everything became about wrestling. And he very much had an eating disorder. He went from 155 and his dad was making him wrestle at 126. And I had parents contacting me. They're like, he's so skinny. He's so tiny. And I would watch his matches online and he would just run out of gas. And so, he was forced to do that for 2 years. And I don't believe he wanted to.
Yeah.
His heart was in baseball, which when he was little, I figured that was the one he would give up because most high school kids now, they really can only handle being a 2-sport athlete, not a 3. Like back in my day, you could manage 3. But It's so much more competitive and intense now than it was back then. But, even his injuries, trying to have them addressed. And that's why he ended up not finishing the year playing baseball because his shoulder and his elbow are gone. And that was a fight years ago to get him to an orthopedic doctor. And that doctor was very candid and said, hey, if you want to even finish high school, you better back off. And he didn't. And his dad didn't let him. It was like, his dad's never had an injury, a real injury. So he doesn't understand, nor does he have the empathy. It's kind of like, oh, you're fine. Go play. You're fine. So I don't know this child anymore. He's a shell of who I raised in terms of kindness and honesty and and treating people well. And it's not just myself that's alienated. Hasn't spoken to his grandmother, my other sister, cut everybody out on my side.
So let's talk about the divorce. You find out he's unfaithful. You file for divorce. How does that look? And when did you start to recognize your son retaliating and being cruel toward you because of the alienating behaviors of the father?
Well, it wasn't the infidelity per se that I filed because I wasn't aware of that. I had caught him with a significant pornography addiction. And overall, I started recognizing that he was breaking me down. I was a shell of who I used to be. And when he was caught with that, I gave him a year and said, you need to go to counseling. You need to take a polygraph because I'm like, yeah, you're cheating, I'm sure, because it was the typical, if it wasn't a sports night, it was, oh, I got to work late, or, oh, my phone was dead, or my ringer was off. And it just was such a pattern that I knew, or I'm going to Home Depot and run out before anybody has a chance to go, well, wait a minute, what? So those were just significant issues. And I requested that he be tested for STDs. And I was like, I don't want anything to do with you. And he went to counseling. He wouldn't take a polygraph. And, I kept bugging him about the whole STD thing. I'm like, and then finally I asked him because I'd seen some test results come in like an email and questioned him. And he goes, oh, well, just so you know, I went while you were in Seattle. I'm like, well, that's interesting. You're trying to rebuild trust with your wife, but you go and get tested while she's out of town and you don't say anything. I said, well, where are the test results? And he hands them to me. He went and paid a third-party company. I said, well, why didn't you use an insurance company? He said, I didn't know how to make an appointment. And then they were not good results. So I filed. So that was the last straw. And then the infidelity came out during, but he still claims that, we just started dating after you filed for divorce, which we all know that's not true. So, but I think my son really struggled even during the whole thing about, your mom's this, your mom's that. And I think he just kind of hung in there as long as he could. And I truly believe the girlfriend he didn't choose my ex because he was getting great benefits in both homes, beautiful truck, he had it all. I spoiled him from the time he was born and I shouldn't have done that. But the girlfriend was enough to get him to make the jump. And I think he was tired of the pressure too. He just finally said, I'm sick of it. I'm sick of the back and forth. Cause I had told him before, I said, I'm not spending your childhood in and out of court with your dad. I'm just and sure enough, I mean, we've been in it the last 4.5 years solid. He filed again in December. So he had taken me to court to pay child support for my son. He makes twice what I do, if not more. And I pay child support until my son aged out. And then it got transitioned back to him paying me. And then that was ordered in November. And then he filed in December to try and reduce it again.
And this is for your daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about that. How are you seeing her attitude and behaviors change toward you now that your son is older and he's focusing and doubling down on her?
I'm just seeing her. Well, for instance, if she's over there, I will see sometimes on a Sunday. Usually I'll reach out to her because that's when I go do my grocery shopping. And nobody likes to shop with their kids. I mean, it's just easier to get the list and go. And I'll be blocked. Or I'll get responses back on text that I know are not her.
Wow.
Things like that. But she's usually when she comes back, there's kind of that transition where she's really kind of clingy and she wants to do projects and wants to, like, at 8 o'clock at night. And then we'll kind of, transition to our normal routine. But it's just like that lack of respect of, hey, would you mind doing this? Just a minute. And won't do it. Being sneaky, getting caught lying, that kind of thing. Like, she's running the show and I'm not. And she'll put me down. That was a big thing with my son, that he was never happy if I accomplished something or something went well. And I was like, hey, guess what? And it was just kind of oh, well, that's good. But there was never this, I'm proud of you, Mom, or I'm happy for you. So it's that constant kind of, I'm seeing her become more critical of me. If you try to address, some kind of behavior with her, then she'll, come back with, well, but, parents do that. Now, the debate over, screen time. Well, but you're on a computer all day. It's just an overall general lack of respect and really seeing how far she can push me. And my son did the same thing and then it turns into you're yelling at me all the time. And I don't yell, but it's kind of like when you start saying, listen, that's it. You need to go get that done. They project that, or they perceive that as yelling because that's what their dad has instilled in their brain. Well, your mom, she yells at you all the time. When it isn't. After you've asked somebody 10 times, said, okay, that's it. Now, right now, do it right now, please. Then it's perceived as you're yelling. And so there's all these things that they do it with other people too. Well, that, teacher yelled at me. And then you get this story and you're like, that doesn't sound like yelling to me. And that sounds appropriate because you weren't following direction and they'd asked you 3 times. So it becomes an environment where as a parent, you can't discipline your kids, but then you're allowing all this behavior towards you, which is making the whole household miserable. And it's causing a lot of stress. So it's really very frustrating. And I don't have the answer to it on how you kind of get that balance back of, I am the parent, I'm the one in charge. You're welcome to disagree with me, but we still have to have mutual respect in this house for everybody. And I didn't have that. I mean, my son thought he was running the show, and I had to tell him a lot of times, like, hey, this is your house, or this is my house, and I'm the parent here. I don't need you to parent your sister. I'm right here. And you take care of you and I'll take care of her. So
Yeah, and they use that as an opportunity to get what they want, and the alienating parent encourages that behavior. Well, you should not have to turn off your phone at 9 p.m. You should be able to use your phone as long as you want. And I can't believe she's making you do your own laundry. Why do you have to pick up your plates? So normal parenting skills become you're a mean parent. She's too strict. I can't believe that you have to do A, B, or C. It's definitely a tactic they use to turn them against you, because then you do have to pivot in your parenting. But what happens when you have to pivot in your parenting skills and what you want for your children is they become something that you don't want them to be.
Absolutely. Well, and you also, it becomes a dynamic too with such a lack of, I guess, respect and value that whatever you give them, it's still not good enough. But the other side can give them crumbs, and that's the greatest thing on the planet. And that's really frustrating too, because then there's that whole lack of gratitude or appreciation where you can't win. You can't win with them. You can't do anything right. And you're walking on eggshells in your own house.
So Let's go back to post-divorce.
Mhm.
He is now in a relationship with his current wife. What role do you think she plays in the alienation?
I think she has been a real catalyst. I think she goes along. So, from what I understand, she's the one that makes the comments, but he's standing, in the kitchen, kind of thing. And then they do this whole sitting down together. So it's a gang up scenario where they come across as being caring and concerned, but they're running me into the ground and they're, planting false memories or things that just flat aren't true. I don't know what motivates this individual. I don't know her, not had a conversation with her. It's definitely that he's tried to do the triangulation thing of like, make these two hate each other, because if they got together and the truth came out, that would not be good,
Right.
because she doesn't know anything about me. Not that's even true. So I think she feels like she's, protecting her man that she, waited so long for, kind of thing. Because I think it was an on-off thing for years where he was just using her, because she was a willing participant, but I don't think he ever had any intentions on going down that road. But he got himself stuck because I filed, and they had already filed, I guess, earlier in the year. So he was pressuring me because I was a stay-at-home mom for a couple of years of like, oh, I think it'd be great if you went back to work. So I think he was trying to get himself aligned, because now she didn't have to protect anybody. She didn't have to protect herself. So it's a dynamic where, from what I understand, she's controlling everything. The household, what they do, where they eat, the rules. She has all these set of rules for her house, kind of scenario. So I don't know. I think they team up together. I think it's a team effort, 100%. And I think she would like to erase me because she's very, very insecure. And I don't know what goes on in the woman's brain. It's not healthy either, because if it was, she'd be recognizing that, like, why don't you're supposed to be moved on with me. I'm supposed to be the focal point, not your ex-wife, and all of these negative things that you're trying to hurt your own kids to get back at her. That she doesn't understand. She's playing the game, but she's not looking at it from an outsider's perspective of, wow, if he was moved on, do you think he would just be leaving everybody alone? And he's not.
Well, unless he's trying badly to have your daughter reject you as well, then you're completely out of the picture, and then she doesn't have to worry about it at all.
That's what she wants, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
hmm
Yeah. And he wants to, I think his intent is, I didn't give you permission to leave me. You embarrassed me because I was the coach. I was an important person in this small town. And you know what? I planned on, because he was never, from the beginning, there was red flags and I just didn't see them. I fell into he was a victim of his mother and, a girl that he dated in college. And, he's forever the victim, the poor, misunderstood, quiet, nice guy. But I didn't understand. I do now, looking back over the last 20 something years, that God, he picked me because he knew I was a hard worker and I would accept the crumbs. And, but I think his intention is, I plan to make you miserable until our daughter's 18, and I'm going to keep doing it whether we're married or not.
hmm
So, and I also believe that they would be happy if I was not living anymore, that they caused me so much hurt and pain that I would give up.
So what are you doing for yourself to cope through this?
It's been a really tough road. And I will say the last probably 6 to 8 months have been very healing of, I didn't push. I went to things, I sat quietly, never said, go Kaden or anything like that. I just kept quiet. I did try to talk to him one time in the parking lot at a baseball game. And I said, hey, Kaden, can I say hi? And he goes, no. And he threw his bag down and walked away. But see, even me texting him, once or twice a month has been transitioned into, she's doubled down on it, which is not the factor. I have never sent an unhappy text or unkind text or anything. So one thing that's I think has helped me a little bit is I set up an email address, a separate email address, and I write to him just like I would, communicating with anybody. And I let him know, what's going on, or, and someday he can read all of
Right.
those. But I will say the last 6 months has been kind of that acceptance of, he's an adult now. And he's going to make his own decisions. I have to remember that on average, parents with adult children that don't live, near each other, they see each other 50 more times in the rest of their lives. But I just, my contact got cut shorter than I had planned. And I missed a lot of, the important seeing him dressed up for prom and homecoming and all those memories that were stolen. But it's trying to move beyond that and understanding that he's a victim too. And I don't believe that, I think he had so much pressure coming from all angles at him that he had had enough. And it was just easier to comply than to be stuck in the middle anymore. And I don't blame him for that. But I do hope that at some point in time, he will stand up for himself and advocate and say, you know what, Dad, you don't get to decide who I'm allowed to love and who I'm allowed to have a relationship with. And that's my mom.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard. I still cry a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a long process because you don't give up on them.
Mm-hmm.
You have so many things that remind you of them. If it's a song or something on a holiday or a picture post, and you see how happy they were and how many memories you made together and the fun things that you did. And those things happened. There wasn't huge blowups or massive conflict or, he was never grounded, never spanked, never any of that. To just get, I guess, ambushed and blindsided that they come back. He's not here 5 minutes and he's out of here, never to be heard from again.
Yeah.
And I feel bad for him because you think, why would anybody want to hurt their kids like that?
Yeah.
Why would you? Because actually, my ex-husband, he was an alienated child. His parents divorced when he was 13, and he had, little contact with his dad. But he said, well, I'm just glad my mom never said anything bad about my dad. But I would hear her, and she would be very sneaky about it, very covert, but the jab would be in there. And after we had our son, I had really been trying to encourage him because I felt like that's why he treated me badly, was that missing puzzle piece, was that connection with his father. And I kept bothering him saying, I just wish you would take a trip, go visit him, take Caden, because I want my son to have a relationship with his granddad. And he was great. I thought he was great. I sure liked him. His mother, you see the carbon copy of how it goes generation after generation. And he is very enmeshed with his mother, which that was another red flag I didn't see either. But I finally got him convinced, and he called him and they had contact, but it would just be like a happy birthday, Merry Christmas, and maybe see him at Thanksgiving once a year at his brother's house. And he called him and they started making plans. And then he was killed a week later in a helicopter crash. He was a pilot.
Wow.
And that's when I saw him really kind of go down the deep end of his bad behaviors and his abusive behaviors. But now we've got another generation, right, that the same thing is happening to them.
Yeah, as that transgenerational trauma that they didn't heal from or they didn't deal with, that they're just continuing that. And it's really not that uncommon. And it's interesting that a lot of my guests and my clients, they have a similar story where I'm an alienated parent, but I was, not in your case, you weren't alienated, but your spouse was, right? And so that's all they know.
My dad very much tried. He very much tried. And my parents didn't divorce until I was a senior in college. So I'd had that time to really, and I finally stood up to him when I was 22. And just because he would say, I don't know what I could have done to be a better husband and father. He was terrible at both. Terrible. And I finally told him that. And then I didn't speak to him for 8 years until then my mom died. And, we had reconnected and it was the same thing. And then we didn't have contact until, he was dying. So it took me a long time to kind of figure out that he was the problem and that he was very much, very abusive. And then I found myself I'm in the same situation. And I can't expect my son, particularly while still living with his father and having, that wife be such a toxic person as well, for him to make any headway.
Definitely. And he's in an abusive environment. And that's the hardest part to recognize. And it sounds like you've recognized that. He is the victim. He is in an abusive household. And once he leaves, he may have more clarity for sure.
I hope so. I think and I don't blame him. When he was in high school, I really was encouraging him to look at colleges out of state because I live in Colorado and he doesn't care for it here. In terms of kind of some of the culture and what he doesn't align with that. And he really likes to fish. And I really encourage him, look at some schools in Montana. I think you would find some people that you really can connect with and, be able to do what you love to do. Just give it a shot or look at Idaho, somewhere. I told him, get away from me, get away from your dad, get away from all of this and go figure out who you are, what you're passionate about, what you want to do with your life. Because I know that his father is going to be like, you need to go to school and be an engineer just like me. He's trying to turn him into an absolute carbon copy of everything, how he looks, how he dresses, how he acts, what sports he did, what he's going to major in, that kind of thing. And I don't understand that. Go be who you want to be and figure out how to make a successful life out of something that you love to do.
So now you have your daughter, and that's scary.
Mm-hmm. It is, because I'm seeing the obstinance start younger than what it did with my son. My son, I want to say it started, probably later in the middle school years, late 7th grade, 8th grade. And then during COVID, it got bad.
Are you getting any support to help you course correct her behavior, or is she the only one getting support?
I've consistently been in counseling. That's something that my employer, supports, which is great because it's no cost out of pocket. And I've been with the same woman for years.
Right.
And, what she's kind of focused on with me is kind of that radical acceptance of you can only control what you can control, and controlling your reactions to it, which has been really, really helpful, and not being reactive to, because the kids both, they knew how to push buttons.
Yeah.
And they would do it until they saw I was upset, hurt, or angry. So definitely focusing on that, and kind of not like going down that rabbit hole of, regurgitating everything that's happened and everything I've been put through. And that is not an easy thing, especially when you're still in it. I think it's a little easier if you're out of it and you don't have to have any kind of contact with that person, and you can heal. And just like they say, you can't heal in the same place that broke you. And that was another reason I sold the farm. I loved it. It was beautiful, but there was just too many things there, too many memories, and it was time to move on. And so I don't know, it's a tough journey, and it's one I did not think that I would still be impacted after making that decision to end a relationship that obviously he didn't value. So I don't know why he's so mad that, I filed, but he's very angry and he's very vengeful that I'm going to pay one way or the other. One thing though, I would like to note for any of your listeners is the continual financial bleed through courts and things. And I had reached out through a Facebook site here for divorce moms here in Colorado and said, what do you do when you have that person that they make a lot more money than you? They're going to waste, $15,000, $20,000 a year on legal fees. How do you get it to stop? Especially if it's just constantly trying to get child support reduced. And they said, file with the child support enforcement with the county and start representing yourself. And that's what I did. So now he's paying a lawyer and I'm not. I mean, I have a benefit through my work that I can use when I need it. And we'll use it through mediation that's coming up. But that took part of that, I guess, that joy away from him, and taking part of that piece out of the game of, I don't care how much it costs me as long as it costs her.
Yes.
And going, if I have to pay X dollars a month in child support, I'm going to make sure I cost her double that in attorney fees. And I'm just not doing it anymore. It's kind of taking yourself out of the game and just saying, I don't want to play this anymore with you.
Well, that was really great. That was a great takeaway for our listeners. And Dana, thank you so much for joining the Fractured Families podcast.
Sure.
Any final thoughts before we close out?
I just, I feel for every single parent going through this, and I wish I had the answers. I don't, but I can say I appreciate watching all of your videos because they've been really helpful to me, even in just validating, because you do, as a parent, you think back and go, did I really fail that bad? Was I really that horrible to deserve this? And it's hard to convince yourself that you didn't deserve it, especially when you've been in an abusive marriage for decades, and then that person can continue to abuse you through your kids. You still think you're the bad guy. So that's something to try and move forward from, and know who you really are and what really did happen and what didn't happen.
Appreciate it. Thank you for
Thank
joining
you for having me.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Fractured Families podcast. I hope our conversation has provided you with support, understanding, and actionable insights to help you navigate your own family challenges. Remember, healing is a journey, and reaching out for help is a sign of strength. You're not alone. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your support helps us reach more families in need. You can contact me on social media at Parental Alienation is Real and visit our website for additional resources and ways to get involved. Stay strong, stay connected, and keep fighting for the family bonds that matter most. Until next time, take care and stay resilient.